Amy's heart raced as she realized her water had broken. In a panic, she urgently called to Henry. "I think my water just broke. We need to get to the hospital." But to her shock, Henry didn't react with the urgency she expected. Instead, he looked at her with a look of distaste. "That's disgusting," he muttered. "Just figure out a way to have the baby." With a large bag in hand, he made his way toward the door, adding casually, "I'm off on a trip. Handle it somehow." Amy's mind was reeling. Handle it somehow? She couldn't believe what she was hearing. How could he leave her alone like this, in labor, without so much as offering a ride? At the very least, he could call a cab for her. But no, Henry refused, claiming it would be too much of a hassle and questioning whether she could just manage the situation on her own without causing trouble for anyone else. With a final, dismissive slam of the door, he was gone, leaving Amy standing there, alone and terrified, clutching her swollen belly. The air felt cold, despite the sweat dripping down her face. She couldn't fathom that her husband would abandon her at such a critical moment. She had never imagined such an outcome when she pictured their life together, especially during her pregnancy. His abandonment hit her hard, and the disappointment quickly solidified into a bitter resentment that would be hard to shake. Amy thought back over their relationship. At 26, she had married Henry, her college sweetheart, right after graduation. Though she was from a distant town and he was rooted in their local community, their desire to be together outweighed all logistical concerns. Their marriage had been well received by his many friends, and their life in the small city seemed typical, part urban, part rural, with a sense of community they both cherished. Henry's parents were divorced, and his mother, who lived alone in the suburbs, had welcomed Amy into the family with open arms. She often shared vegetables from her garden, and Amy grew close to her, feeling the warmth of the family bond. But things had changed once Amy got pregnant. Henry became increasingly irritable and withdrawn. His long hours at work and frequent business trips created a rift between them. Initially, he'd been excited about the baby, picking out baby clothes, furniture, and toys. There were even nights when he came home late and still made an effort to cook for them, his enthusiasm shining through in a way that seemed genuine. But that energy had quickly fizzled, replaced by cold indifference. Amy, used to her mother's home-cooked meals, now found herself repulsed by the rich, heavy food Henry prepared. She tried to gently turn down his efforts, but it was clear he was frustrated. He couldn't understand why his cooking wasn't satisfying her, especially during her pregnancy. When she explained how her body was reacting to the food, he responded with anger. He slapped her in a fit of rage, leaving her stunned and heartbroken. She tried to explain that every pregnancy was different, but Henry dismissed her feelings, comparing her to his colleagues who seemed unaffected. His cruelty cut deep, physically and emotionally. Amy wanted to defend herself, to explain that her body wasn't the same as everyone else's, but she feared the situation would escalate if she did. Henry seemed to think she was being wasteful, and his frustration grew. When he accused her of being stingy and took the food away, Amy felt even more isolated. Her thoughts spiraled in the quiet of the night, as worry and pain kept her from sleep. After that incident, Henry stopped cooking altogether. Instead, he ate out more often, rarely telling Amy where he was going. His frequent meals outside only added to their growing financial strain. Amy's pregnancy continued to take a toll on her body and mind, and she decided to start her maternity leave earlier than planned. But Henry's sarcastic comments about her being lazy only heightened her stress. Despite his belief that housework didn't matter, she continued to manage the home as best she could, all while dealing with the emotional and physical challenges of pregnancy. One evening, Amy received a call from Barbara, a friend who had always felt more like a sister. Barbara casually mentioned that their company, where Henry also worked, enforced a no-overtime policy on Wednesdays, directly contradicting Henry's frequent claims of staying late at the office. The revelation left Amy confused, planting seeds of doubt about Henry's honesty. That same night, after Henry came home late once more, Amy accidentally caught a glimpse of his phone. The screen was filled with messages, heart emojis included, from someone other than her. The contrast between those messages and the emotional distance in her own marriage sent a chill through her, sparking fears of an affair. As she tried to process what she had seen, Henry confronted her, accusing her of snooping. Amy was overwhelmed by a chaotic swirl of emotions: betrayal, confusion, and a deepening sense of isolation. Her pregnancy, which was already draining her physically and emotionally, now felt even more complicated by these troubling suspicions. Trying to regain control of the situation, she tried to pick up after herself and tidy the room, but in her distracted state, she accidentally dropped Henry's phone. In her effort to check if it had been damaged, Henry exploded in fury, berating her for her clumsiness. He claimed that she had caused a new scratch on the already cracked screen and criticized her for neglecting her household chores. His accusations felt like a blow to her already fragile sense of self. As he stormed off, clutching his phone protectively. Amidst the turmoil, there was a sliver of comfort for Amy. She was looking forward to Henry's mother visiting, bringing fresh produce from her garden and offering her advice on childbirth. Despite the emotional distance between her and Henry, the thought of his mother's warmth gave Amy a sense of hope. She spent the day preparing the house meticulously, even putting on makeup to feel presentable. To her surprise, Henry was home that day, seemingly preparing for a trip. When Amy asked him about his plans, especially since his mother was due to arrive, he acted as though he hadn't remembered their earlier conversation. His indifference stung, and before Amy could press him further, the situation hung in the air, unresolved. A sharp, sudden pain signaled the beginning of labor, triggering an urgent need to get to the hospital. But Henry's reaction to my water breaking was nothing short of dismissive. He treated the situation as if it were a minor inconvenience. For a brief moment, I thought he might show some care when he called a taxi, leading me to believe he still had some consideration for me. However, my hope was short-lived. He claimed the taxi for himself and left me behind. Fully aware of my vulnerable state, he departed for his own plans, leaving me in agony and isolation. Just as I felt abandoned, there was a knock at the door. It was Henry's mother. She immediately understood the urgency of the situation and rushed me to the hospital. Her swift action was a stark contrast to Henry's neglect, underscoring the deep divide between their responses to my most critical need for support. The chaos of the evening melted away as I cradled my newborn, a peaceful moment in stark contrast to the tumultuous events that led to it. The baby, healthy and vibrant, brought a sense of relief, soothing my weary soul. As I recovered in the hospital, my mother-in-law came by, bringing food and concern. Her confusion deepened when she found me alone, especially after Henry had supposedly taken the day off to be with me. When I recounted how Henry had left for a supposed trip just before my labor started, and how he had coldly told me to handle the birth on my own before walking out, her shock turned into anger. It was a side of her I had never seen before, her usual calm demeanor replaced by rightful indignation. The weight of the situation hit me hard the following day when my parents arrived from our hometown. Telling them everything was difficult, and reaching out to Barbara, my close friend and Henry's colleague, added even more layers to the story. Barbara's reaction was swift and fierce. She visited me despite the usual reservations about coming so soon after childbirth because she knew there were important things to discuss. As soon as she arrived, the conversation shifted to a serious tone. Hesitant around my mother-in-law, Barbara suggested that I consider divorce. It was a heavy suggestion, but given the circumstances, she believed it was necessary. She then shared her suspicions about Henry's infidelity, pointing to a colleague named Rachel, with whom Henry had appeared unusually close. Barbara had seen them together outside of work, and the way they interacted hinted at something beyond a professional relationship. The possibility of an affair, combined with his abandonment during my labor, painted a grim future for my marriage. Both my mother-in-law and Barbara reassured me that they were there for me, offering not only emotional support but practical help. They suggested I move out of the house I shared with Henry, extending invitations to stay with them in their homes. Overwhelmed by their generosity, I accepted my mother-in-law's offer to stay with her temporarily. The transition wasn't easy, moving my belongings, adjusting to a new living situation while recovering from childbirth, and caring for a newborn all at once was daunting, but with their support, I began to see a path forward, even if it meant leaving behind the life I had once known with Henry. The unwavering support of my mother-in-law and Barbara became a solid foundation that helped me face the challenges ahead with newfound hope and determination. Their willingness to help, whether by moving my belongings or offering a safe place to stay, reminded me of the strength found in genuine familial and friendship bonds. Their generosity shone brightly during such a dark period, offering me a sense of security when everything else felt uncertain. My mother-in-law, always eager to visit her grandchild, found comfort in being close to her new grandbaby. Barbara, who played a crucial role in helping me move, showed me a level of kindness and support that was both overwhelming and deeply moving. The room they made for me at my mother-in-law's house was spacious and inviting, a true reflection of their care and efforts to make me feel at ease during one of the most difficult times in my life. During a conversation at the hospital, a call from Henry interrupted our peace. My mother-in-law's silent gesture to ignore the call spoke volumes. Her disillusionment with him was palpable. It was a sentiment I was slowly coming to terms with myself. Despite my hesitation, I answered the call on speaker, informing Henry that I was in the hospital but couldn't speak for long. His response to hearing about the birth of our baby, coupled with his complete disregard for our current circumstances, was telling. His insistence on asserting his rights as a father, after abandoning me in labor, only strengthened my resolve to distance myself from him. Even as he denied the accusations of an affair, his defensiveness did little to hide the truth. The disappointment on my mother-in-law's face was undeniable, and her apology, blaming herself for Henry's actions, broke my heart. She even shared the painful reasons behind her divorce from Henry's father, drawing an unsettling parallel to my own situation. But what truly took me by surprise was what she did the following day. She organized a confrontation, bringing Henry, his alleged mistress Rachel, and Barbara to my home. Through a video call, I watched as the truth was laid bare. Henry's feeble excuses and attempts to justify his actions were met with disgust and disbelief. Barbara's anger mirrored my own, her rebuke of his excuses underscoring the depth of the betrayal. The reality of his infidelity and neglect hit with full force, making it impossible to deny any longer. It was clear that the support of my mother-in-law and Barbara was irreplaceable. They stood by me, not just with words but with concrete actions that proved their unwavering commitment to my well-being and the well-being of my child. In contrast to Henry's failings, their solidarity and courage to confront him head-on reminded me of the strength that comes from true family and friendship. As the confrontation reached its peak, the room fell silent as Barbara passionately tore apart Henry's flimsy justifications, challenging the false narrative he tried to maintain. Her fury emphasized the weight of his betrayal, making it clear that he could no longer escape the truth. Not all men resort to such deceit, but Henry, cornered and desperate, threatened legal action in a last-ditch attempt to regain control. However, his bluff was quickly called when Barbara presented undeniable evidence of his affair with Rachel, heartfelt messages and photos that left no room for doubt. The discovery of the affair, especially during such a vulnerable time in my life, hit me like a tidal wave. The thought of Henry choosing to prioritize his mistress over our family's safety, particularly during my labor, was unforgivable. Faced with irrefutable proof, I made the heart-wrenching decision to end our marriage. With the full support of my mother-in-law and Barbara, Their applause and encouragement were a powerful affirmation of my resolve. Henry's feeble attempts to justify his absence during the birth and his infidelity only strengthened my resolve. His admission that Rachel was more important to him at the time was a harsh revelation of his misplaced priorities, showing just how little he valued our family. The situation took another unexpected turn when Rachel's husband arrived. His presence added another layer of complexity to the already volatile situation, exposing Rachel's deceit not only toward me but also toward her own family. Confronted with the truth, Rachel's husband was understandably devastated, especially after learning of her pregnancy, which further entangled the web of lies and betrayal. As if things weren't complicated enough, Rachel's own situation became even murkier. The truth about her existing family, coupled with her intention to conceal her second pregnancy, made her actions even more reprehensible. Her husband, in a heartbreaking moment of clarity, chose to distance himself from her, taking responsibility for their daughter. This decision underscored the deep emotional scars Rachel had inflicted, not only on me but also on her own family. In the midst of all the chaos, Henry made a final audacious declaration. He intended to marry Rachel and raise the child together, despite the destruction they had caused. His refusal to grasp the magnitude of the situation, and his ability to so easily abandon everything for her, was a stark reminder of his complete lack of understanding and misplaced priorities. This tumultuous confrontation not only cemented my decision to move forward with the divorce, but it also reinforced the need for a future built on respect, trust, and genuine care. It was clear that Henry's actions had irreparably damaged any chance of a future together, and I was determined to build a life far removed from the deceit, betrayal, and heartache that had come to define my marriage. In the heat of the confrontation, Rachel's husband made a strategic move by presenting divorce papers, catching Henry off guard for a brief moment. The discussion quickly escalated, shifting to matters of child support and asset division. Henry, clearly defensive, tried to argue his financial priorities in light of his new responsibilities. His absurd justification, blaming the pregnancy for his desire to maintain a carefree lifestyle, was met with disbelief and sharp rebukes from everyone in the room, particularly from my mother-in-law, who made it clear that she no longer supported him. As the argument progressed, it was decided that I would pursue child support from Henry, a course of action that Rachel's husband also agreed to take in his own situation. With the lawyer's contact information provided by Rachel's husband, we were ready to take immediate legal action. My mother-in-law and Barbara stood by me, offering their unwavering support. After finishing a quiet moment with my newborn, I signed the divorce papers. The decision was daunting, but the encouragement from the strong women by my side made the moment feel empowering. In addition to taking legal action, I asked Barbara to spread the word about Henry's behavior within their professional network. In a community where reputation held significant weight, such a revelation would have profound consequences. The ripple effect of Barbara's efforts was swift and unmistakable, and soon enough, Henry and Rachel found themselves ostracized by their peers and stripped of professional opportunities. The repercussions were not limited to their careers, they also faced personal isolation and, eventually, left the company entirely. Amid the turmoil, I found solace in my mother-in-law's presence. Her infectious enthusiasm for caring for her grandchild during my maternity leave brought a much-needed sense of peace. The time I spent with her also gave me the opportunity to reconnect with nature, allowing me to appreciate the tranquility of our surroundings. As I prepared to return to work and adjust to life in a new home with my baby, the constant support from my mother-in-law remained a pillar of strength. Her open invitation to turn to her for help whenever needed reaffirmed the strong, reliable foundation I had come to rely on. With renewed hope, I embraced the future, grateful for the lessons I had learned and the resilience I had gained through the trials of this difficult journey.